wants to take the lead? Buddy? You'll be fielding some questions from members of the Public Accounts Committee in no specific order, and some questions from the Auditor General and his staff. So
That's fine.
Minister Jordan.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mr. Drummond and Mr. Graves. Just a opening question in terms of your role as quality assurance. Well, when you acted as quality assurance manager, what did those functions entail?
Well, I was never the quality assurance manager. I was the quality assurance officer.
Right. I'm asking, what did those, when you were acting as quality assurance officer, what did those duties entail?
I have the description here, if I could read it. Sorry, okay.
While you're looking for that, is there no a quality assurance manager substantively at the board?
No, sir.
All right.
The quality assurance officer is specific job duties and responsibilities, assists with the licensing and inspection of vehicles, prepares and monitors service rotors for vehicles, assists in checking vehicles for defects, prepares reports as required, prepares rosters and vacations for clerks, vehicle inspectors, and fleet attendants, assists in checking the analysis of invoices from UCAL, assists in liaising with the board service providers to ensure that all reported defects are addressed and repaired to the manufacturer's specifications, perform any other related duties.
Thanks, Mr. Drummond. You mentioned there are a couple of things I want to follow up on. One has to do with the checking in terms of repairs when vehicles are or have been said to be repaired. What is the process of flagging? For example, we have had in the Auditor General's report reference to particular buses units being repeatedly repaired. The suggestion is that something was fundamentally wrong, nobody picked it up. My question is, what process was in place during the time that you acted as quality assurance officer that would have allowed you to flag such an observation, to report such an observation? What mechanism was in place for that,
Okay.
if any?
When the unit is returned from the service provider, a vehicle inspector would come and we would check and see what the unit went to the service provider for. The vehicle inspector would check and make sure that the repairs were done and they were done adequately. And once that was established, you would tell the clerk on duty, it will go on that it is ready for the road. It will go on a finish sheet, and it will be entered into a finish book for that job sheet that it was sent to be repaired for. Then it would be turned over to operations, who would come and sign a turnover book, time, date, operations supervisor, and the vehicle inspector or clerk handing over the bus to the operations for use on the road.
So was there a procedure in place that would bring to the attention of the operations department, as an example, or the accounting department, that a particular unit kept showing up cleared, back on the road, then some weeks later showing up again. Was there any procedure in place that would allow that to be flagged?
I don't know about before, because I was in Spikestown for 3 years prior to coming to PAC in March this year. But currently, we have a system in place. Anytime a bus is has a defect, it's checked, and it has to go to a service provider. It's the duty of the inspector and the clerks to check the system before and see the memos that were previous, to see if it was a return or something of that nature. And if such is the case, it will be flagged. We have a little section in the system with notes, and you would put a note, type a note in there, and it will also notify the person in charge of the quality assurance department or senior vehicle inspector, and we would take it from there.
All right, thanks very much for that. You mentioned the second thing I said there were two things. The second thing you spoke to was that, I think you actually read it, that one of your duties was to check, in that period acting as the quality assurance officer, checking invoices from UCAL. Is there any reason, or was there any reason, why only UCAL is identified?
No, I think at the time that these duties were drawn up, it was only UCAL that was in place. But basically, we checked, when it came on, we were to check all the service providers, the invoices from all the service providers. The invoices were coming, we would check the system. The system is called Magneto system. We check the Magneto.
Magneto, okay.
Yeah. The clerks would be the first to check the system. They will enter the information into the system. Mm-hmm. Then it will go and it will be checked again. And eventually it will come to once everything is okay, because you will check the amount of hours they charge per job against standard rates that we have for jobs, certain jobs. So you will check against that. You will check that the description of the job is corresponds with what was in the system. Then eventually it will come up to the quality assurance officer, who would check again. And once everything is okay, you'll sign off, and then eventually it will go over to the accounts department.
Was there any process in place? Let me ask it a different way. Against what did you check the invoices that came from UCAL or any other service provider? What was it that you were checking the invoice before you against?
The job sheet number in the system, the description of the job or jobs in the system, the hourly rates, or the amount of hours, that we will allot to a job, because they were charged maybe 4 hours, 6, 1 hour per job, depends on the job. The amount was tally and correct, should be correct, and I think that was it, the completion date.
No, the reason why I was asking those questions, the matter of multiple invoices for the same job, I'm just wondering how that could have happened. Because before they're paid, somebody does some checking. Is there anything in Magneto or any other system that allows you to know that this particular job number, I'm not sure you called it?
Job sheet number.
Job sheet number, sorry. This job sheet number has already been tagged or attach to an invoice that has gone through the system already? Is there anything that highlights
Yes,
that?
yes.
And would you care to explain that for us?
When you put the job sheet number in the system, so you have the invoice and you're entering it into the system now, and you put in the job sheet number, and it's in already, it would come up in the system on the screen. It would come up on the screen, and it would not allow you to enter it a second time, the same number in second time.
So for every invoice, the system attaches a job sheet number,
Yes,
and it is, I'm sorry, let's repeat what I think I heard you to say. You enter the invoice, you attach a job sheet number. Once that job sheet number is attached to an invoice, then you cannot enter a day, a week, a month, a year later, another invoice to attach the same job sheet number.
right, correct.
It'll signal to you that it's already being used.
Yes.
Okay. Is there in your experience, I know it's been short, but in your experience in that role, your acting role, any situation system-wise that would allow for an invoice to be paid for the same job multiple times?
Not during my time as the QA or quality assurance officer. No, not during my time.
What explanation would you offer as to how double invoicing could occur? You're saying
Rationale will say that it probably didn't go through the procedures.
it didn't go through the procedures.
Yeah.
That's a frequent practice, to your knowledge?
Not that I know of. I only heard about it with the Auditor General's report.
Why, in your view, would an invoice not go through the system, as you put it? What would occasion something like that?
I am not sure what actually happened there.
But is there any reasonable explanation that you can suggest as to why?
Somebody did not do what was to be done.
Okay. Minister Moore, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Just for my own edification, in order to get a job sheet number, someone must certify that the job is required to be done on the bus.
Yes, please.
So that's the first thing. So if I brought the bus in and it had, I don't know, a transmission problem, for example, or a brake problem, whatever, someone must certify that they've done this inspection, and so then they issue a job sheet number for someone to do the work on it. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, they would determine the bus has to go to a service provider, and when we enter it in the system generates a job sheet number. So you are relying all brakes, for example. They put that in the system will generate a job sheet number.
So it's only after the job sheet number is issued that they can then go to the service provider. Is that what you're
Yes.
saying?
Yes.
Okay. So someone at the transport board must say or assume that something wrong, whether it's brakes or whatever, then they then get a job sheet number issued, and from there then it goes to the service provider.
Yes.
Then the service provider then sends an estimate. Is that how it works?
Yes, it should. Yes.
And then they will send an estimate for the job, and then y'all will agree that that estimate for that work is reasonable or the work needs to be done. Is that how it works?
Yes. Yes.
And then once the work is done, then it comes back to you as the quality assurance officer.
Yeah, they
make
come back
sure-
as the department.
Right. So then the quality assurance officer then agrees that the job was done. Is that how it works?
Yes. In a nutshell.
So then once you agree it's done, then the invoice then is authorized then for payment?
Yes. Once it's in the system as completed, you will get an invoice probably about a month, 6 weeks after for the job. So then we would have to reconcile it against the information that is in the system.
So to get multiple invoices for the same job, someone has to say, the job needs to be done again. Our job needs to be done, period.
Yeah, somebody will have to enter in the system.
Now, that's my first question. My second question is, I think I may have missed it. How long did you say you were the quality assurance officer? From when to when?
March the 17th,
What year?
2019, this year.
Just
Yeah.
so you only there for this year?
Yeah, 6 weeks.
So you were not there before?
I was in Spikestone for 3 years before that, but I was at various depots from time I went to Transport Board in 2000.
So when you were at Spikestown, you were not in the position of within the quality assurance department?
Yes, I was still a vehicle inspector, but I was located at Spikestone.
So your vehicles too would then go through the same identical process?
Yes.
So regardless of where the depot, which depot the bus was in, it goes through the identical process?
Yes.
And my last question is, in the Auditor General's report, it said that the quality assurance personnel indicated that a reconditioned transmission should last approximately, you know, there's no certainty in these things, but at least 2 years. And that was the exact comment, at least 2 years. Do you agree with that?
Yes, it should.
Okay, that's it for me for now.
Thank you very much. And I just have a couple of questions. You came on as the quality assurance officer. You said March 17th, 2019.
Correct.
So then we would have had something like 9 months so far of you in the job.
Yeah, well, I was there for the 6 weeks, and then I went down to the second position. Yeah, but
Just
yeah,
under a
that
year.
was nine.
Right, okay. Now, in the report, it has at Appendix 4, it talks about the high frequency of transmission changes. And it identified a number of buses, identifying them by bus number, and establishing the dates on which they were changed. So we have most of the buses listed having at least 3 to 4 transmission changes. One actually has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 transmission changes. So since you have come on, have you found that those buses have needed the same level of transmission change? In the 9 months, have you had buses that needed that kind of frequent change? Some of those same buses that don't seem to be standing up very well?
No, ma'am.
You have not had that problem
No,
since
ma'am.
you've come? Okay, thank you very much.
During the period that when you would have acted as quality control officer,
Quality assurance officer.
quality assurance officer, were there any instances where you queried either if you know the quality of the service, the work that the service provider was providing, the quality of the parts? So were there any concerns that you had that perhaps you were not getting the level of service that you were paying for? And I'm asking that because, as was said before, the Auditor General has raised in his report the frequency of not only buses generally, but specific units, which, you know, in a very short period of time would have had you know, a transmission being repaired, having to be replaced, and then in 6 months' time, the same unit having the transmission being replaced or repaired again. Was there any concerns about the quality of service provided or parts?
Once or twice we had some concerns, but we pretty much had them worked out. when we did our investigations and spoke with the service providers.
Were they ever, raised with management for, any reports done which went off to the board, for example, so that the board would be aware of these particular issues? That you know?
Well, we had a concern about the servicing of the transmissions in particular. And since we took over, we have instituted a service program for the transmissions. And, you still have one or two, that would eventually wear out now because of the age of the bus. But the high frequency we had of transmission return over and over, we're not really seeing that right now since we started that service program in place.
The issue was raised a little earlier, in fact, at the beginning, in relation to the over invoicing. I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back through that again. But I'm just asking, in terms of the procedure which you went through for us just now. I know hindsight is 2020, but looking back on it, are there any things you think that could have been done differently to improve the system so that we don't, going forward, you don't end up with a system whereby that, double invoices can be avoided, or something in place to mitigate against that, or to strengthen the system?
Yes, we have noted and asked for certain additional functionalities to be put into the Magneto system, and we're actually in progress of having added in a sign-off by the actual vehicle inspector on the jobs. If you put in the same job within a certain time frame, it gives you alert in the system. We've been normally, right now we have to manually check, but for the system to automatically issue an alert, we've asked for these functionalities to be put in place, and they're actually working on it right now.
You have, is there a asset register?
I am not sure. You have to ask the
that
finance.
keeps track of all of the units and the various bits of other assets of the authority.
Yeah, I assume the finance department would have that.
But you're not aware.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Yes, another question, Mr. Jamot. The Magneto program, would you know how long that was in place?
From,
Months,
I
years?
think about years, 2013,
Okay.
yeah, somewhere around that time.
A question about the boards, and given that you're a vehicle inspector substantively, the board has a procedure that speaks to the estimated number of days, well, no, sorry, not days, I think it's kilometers, or kilometers, however you pronounce it, the frequency of servicing, because it's recognized that buses do a lot of driving, and it's sometimes very challenging situations. The Auditor General asserts that based on his department's investigation, that this procedure wasn't followed. So rather than every 28 days, sometimes it went almost 100 days over. I think on average, yeah, the average number of days rather than being 28 was 129. So 4 times more than the average. from your perspective, any reason why that would have been the case? Why buses were not being serviced at the frequency that the board's operating procedure recommended that they be serviced?
Well, from what I understood at the time, but I was just a vehicle inspector at the time, but it was a finance problem. There was a money issue in terms of parts and servicing.
What, in your view, would have been the impact as a vehicle inspector? Well, not in your view, from your observation, what impact did this situation have?
Buses deteriorated very rapidly. You had a lot of breakdowns on the road. You see a lot of wear and tear on the units over a period of time in observation. Just deterioration, rapid deterioration.
And with those breakdown of buses, what was the board's response? I'm asking a specific question. If the bus breaks down, what happened?
You try to repair it once parts and allow. So on regular, you didn't have the parts available. And when you ask a question, it was basically money,
No, you referred just now to the finance department, so I understand you're not a finance person. Did it come up in any discussion that money might have been the issue for the servicing not taking place with the frequency that the servicing should have taken place at, causing breakdowns, sometimes buses not being repaired because of lack of money for parts? Did it come up in discussion that a situation like that meant that the board then could not earn money?
Yeah.
In other words, the board earns money by buses being on the road, picking up passengers and taking their fare. If you don't have money to buy parts, so I'm talking about the fact that we were kind of like, the transport board trying to catch its tail, so to speak, in circles. Did that ever come up in any meetings, conversations that you would be part of, official meetings and conversations?
Well, at the time, I wasn't in anything official conversations, but in general, probably staff meetings within the department, yes, it came up regularly.
What kind of response did you get from your superiors? Because that is something that you kind of put up to the level above you. What kind of response did you get from them?
There just is no money.
I just needed a little clarification. I believe Senator Nurse had asked, I wasn't clear about the question because I was trying to take a note at the time, whether something was done differently to stop the repairs from being so frequent. Was that a question that was asked?
Yes, since we took over, yes.
And your response was?
We changed the servicing times on the vehicles, and we also added a service program for the transmissions, changing filters and fluid, that sort of stuff.
Question. We were told that the reconditioned transmissions, which cost about $6,000 from overseas, versus the $22,000, $24,000 repairs that were being done locally. When we asked the question, why, having discovered that there were $6,000 reconditioned transmissions, which would last you 2 years, why these were not bought rather than staying with spending $22,000 twice a year? We were told that there was no money. the question I want to ask is, since you have come into the position, has thought been given or efforts made to get the reconditioned transmissions instead of?
Yes, ma'am. We have gotten some reconditioned transmissions since then.
Do you have an idea of how many you brought in?
12 to date.
Oh, 12? Okay. All right, and you need more?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Good, thank you.
Sorry, to your knowledge, when you were, say, in your position in Speightstown, there are many different service providers. How did you all select the service provider that you would send the bus to, given the issue or problem with the bus? Was there a particular methodology used to select who it was sent to, or was selection done by someone else? Was it done by your department? Were there recommendations given as to where it should go? Can you perhaps just clarify or elucidate a little more on that process?
Unfortunately, all I can tell you is that selection was done by the management of the department. If you check the bus as a vehicle inspector and you found that the problem with the, for example, the transmission, you will notify the management of the department and they will get back to you and tell you where to send the bus, where to take the bus with service provider.
So you all never gave recommendations as to where you thought the bus should go, given the nature of the issue that was ever done?
We always give recommendations, but the management made their decisions.
And currently now, because you're no longer in Speightstown, you're now, I guess, here in St. Michael.
Yeah.
So how, is that process any different? Or is it still selected by management, or do you all make recommendations, or what happens?
Well, generally a discussion among the hierarchy of the department and probably the person who actually checked the bus. And we will look at how much buses the service provider may have, and if they're able to do that job, how quickly, cost.
And during the time that it would be where you had to make a decision as to where the bus should go, well, maybe not for you per se, but certain recommendation. Was there a period of time where you may have complained about the quality of work or the length of time or any other aspect of the service provider's activity or work on those buses?
Before March?
When you were in Speightstown?
Yes.
And so when you would complain perhaps that it took too long or the quality wasn't good, what of all the different options, which would you say for you all in Speightstown was the most frequent? Was it length of time, the quality of the work, pricing? What was the most difficult thing that you experienced with service providers?
Quality of work.
And that quality of work, did you view it as substandard?
Yeah, not the best. Not all the time.
So I can then say that not the best is a synonym of substandard.
Yes.
Okay. And when this would occur, and you would then lodge your complaints, it's a beautiful place, isn't it?
Very.
Yeah.
Very.